For the past few months, one of the key points of tension between the US and Iran has been Iran's insistence on exercising control over the Strait of Hormuz. Since the war kicked off, Iran has attacked ships passing through the main bed of the strait, and has instead tried to force them to transit through the narrow passage between Iran's Qashm and Arak islands, allowing Iran to impose a sort of toll, which is apparently collected in the form of crypto and amounts to roughly $2 million per ship. Unsurprisingly, the Americans didn't like this. Not just because continued control of the strait would give Iran a permanent form of leverage against the US and its Gulf allies, who rely heavily on the strait for exporting their oil and gas, but also because it was illegal under international law, which is something the US apparently cares about. This was Marco Rubio, for instance, speaking on June 23rd.
Well, that's the law. It's an international waterway. No country is allowed to charge tolls or fees on an international waterway. That's existing international law. That's the way it is in international waterways all over the world, and that's the way we expect it'll be here. So I don't think we have anybody to convince around here in that regard. I think all the countries in this region would agree with us.
However, on Monday, the US suddenly changed its tune, with Trump announcing via Truth Social that the US, henceforth referred to as the guardian of the Hormuz Strait, would actually be charging its own tolls on the strait, calculated at 20% of the value of the ship's cargo. In practice, many times more expensive than the current Iranian system. So in this video, we're going to look at Trump's latest gambit, why, as insane as it might sound, it wasn't wholly unforeseeable, and why it will probably backfire in the longer run. This spring, we visited Greenland to discover the country and find out why it's been such a major geopolitical flashpoint. While we were there, we camped on a glacier, trekked through the wild to find abandoned military installations, and explored the melting oceans, all to answer the question, what's the big deal with Greenland? The documentary is now streaming exclusively to TLDR party members. You can sign up or watch the full trailer by clicking the link in the description. So, the key thing to understand here is that the US and Iran were never able to actually agree on how the Strait of Hormuz should be handled. In last month's negotiations, the US insisted that Iran should give up control of the strait and return things to their pre-war status quo, while Iran insisted that the new toll system was here to stay. In the end, the two sides agreed on a sort of fudge. Iran agreed to stop imposing tolls during the 60-day ceasefire outlined in the Memorandum of Understanding, and, quote, take steps to ensure that the movement of merchant ships is returned within 30 days to the pre-war volume, taking into account the need for the removal of technical obstacles and the neutralization of mines by Iran. But the two sides seem to have interpreted this clause very differently. In his Truth Social post announcing the deal, for instance, Trump talked about a toll-free opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and told the New York Times that the strait would be, quote, permanently toll-free. But this never really made sense, given that the MOU only covered the subsequent 60 days. Furthermore, the Iranians apparently interpreted this clause quite differently. In an interview with state media, for instance, Iran's foreign minister claimed that under the MOU, future management of the waterway will be different from the past, and that services will no longer be free. In essence, it sounds like Iran nominally agreed to not impose tolls, but instead planned to charge quote-unquote service fees, essentially just rebranding the existing toll system. Unsurprisingly, this fudge proved somewhat unsustainable, and almost immediately after the MOU was signed, Iran and the US started arguing over how ships would pass through the strait. Even if it wasn't charging tolls, Iran wanted ships to continue passing through Qashm and Arak, while the US instead started encouraging ships to basically use the other side of the strait and just hug the Omani coastline. This made it nearly impossible for Iran to collect tolls, and there was an implicit argument here that because the ships were transiting through Oman's territorial waters, Iran lacked jurisdiction in the first place. By the way, this will put Oman in an incredibly difficult position. Oman has traditionally maintained cordial relations with both Iran and the US, acting as a useful and trustworthy intermediary, but now came under intense pressure to basically pick a side. The Iranians were pushing for the two countries to set up a joint toll system and share the proceeds, while the US signaled that they would consider any such scheme unacceptable, with Trump literally threatening to blow up Oman if they misbehaved.
Mr. President, Iran wants control of the Strait of Hormuz. Would you accept a short-term deal that allows Iran and Oman to control the strait? And would they have to open it immediately, or would you be open to that happening over a period of time?
No, the strait's going to be open to everybody.
And who would control it?
International waters. Nobody's going to control it. We're going to watch over it. We'll watch over it, but nobody's going to control it. That's part of the negotiation that we have. They would like to control it. Nobody's going to control it. It's international waters, and Oman will behave just like everybody else, so we'll have to blow them up. They understand that. They'll be fine.
This disagreement seems to be the fundamental reason the war restarted recently, and the 3 ships that Iran apparently hit last week, which is what triggered the original military reaction from the US, were all hugging the Omani coastline. Predictably, once it became clear that the war was back on, Iran announced that the strait was once again closed, with the implication that any ships wanting to pass would once again have to go through Iran's new toll booths. Equally predictably, the US reacted by reimposing the blockade on everything coming in and out of Iran's ports. Somewhat less predictably, however, was Trump's announcement that the US would impose its own tolls, calculated at 20% of the value of a ship's cargo. In practice, this would be many times more expensive than the current Iranian tolls, which allegedly come in at about $2 million per ship. Think about a supertanker, for instance. They can carry about 2 million barrels of oil. At the current price of $85 a barrel, that implies a total value of about $170 million. 20% of this, which is what Trump is proposing for his new toll system, would come to about $34 million, 17 times more expensive than Iran's current toll of $2 million. This obviously came as a shock, but it isn't a wholly new idea. Trump has been complaining about the role that the US Navy plays in guaranteeing freedom of navigation in far-off waterways since his first term, and has floated the idea of the US imposing tolls on the strait on multiple occasions since the war. In June, for instance, he suggested that if no deal was agreed, the US could impose tolls for services rendered as the guardian angel to the countries of the Middle East, for purposes of both past, present, and future reimbursement of costs. And way back in April, Trump was suggesting that the US could impose tolls as sort of a reward for winning the war.
Mr. President, are you allowed to, or are you willing to end this conflict with Iran charging tolls for passage through the strait?
Us charging tolls?
Iran.
What about us charging tolls?
Is that something you're considering?
I'd rather do that than let them have them, right? Why shouldn't we? We're the winner. We won, okay? They are militarily defeated. The only thing they have is the psychology of, oh, we're going to drop a couple of mines in the water, all right? No, we have a concept where we'll charge tolls, okay? I thought you meant us. Your question would have been more accurate if you said us. Go ahead.
More generally, this is pretty consistent with Trump's broader attitude towards foreign policy. He thinks of the US as being taken advantage of, and is always pressing even America's traditional allies for compensation, usually in the form of cash. But while behaving like a mafia state might work in the short term, in the long term it'll just incentivize other countries to reduce their dependence on the US wherever they can. In this specific case, for instance, while the US might be able to squeeze some cash out of its Gulf allies, in the medium to long term, it will just encourage them to find or create alternatives to the strait, as they're already doing, and push them closer to other potential security guarantors, including most obviously China. Now, as you're probably aware, it's kind of impossible to avoid talking or thinking about the big players that control our world, much like the ones we've spoken about in today's video. But it's not just the government leaders that impact our day-to-day life, it's also the big companies, and how increasingly difficult it is to avoid their influence. So I bet you're wondering how you can start taking back that control, and luckily we have a simple solution for you, and it starts with your email. While it might seem insignificant, your email is extremely personal to you, and it's important to keep hold of what's yours. And thankfully, Proton Mail will help you get that control back. It's a private, secure alternative to big companies like Google, and will give you everything you need to be productive, all while keeping those pesky ads away from your inbox. From preventing dangerous phishing attacks with their fish guard protection feature, to protecting your identity by alerting you if your email has been sold on the dark web, Proton Mail has everything you need to stay safe online. They also offer end-to-end zero-access encryption, meaning their emails truly stay private, inaccessible to advertisers, trackers, or even Proton themselves. This means your email and your information stay safe and secure. No more ads, no tracking, and no profiling, giving you back the control you deserve. Making the switch doesn't have to be a hassle. Proton Mail's Easy Switch tool allows you to move your emails and contacts from your current provider in just a few steps. You can even connect your Gmail account and receive and send messages from it directly in Proton Mail while you transfer everything over at your own pace. So there's no pressure to switch it all at once. So start using Proton Mail for free today by using our link at proton.me/TLDR, and you'll be one step closer to a fully protected online experience, free from data exploitation.